All right, so um, diving in today, we're tackling this idea of resistance, that feeling that keeps us from, well, reaching our full potential.
Oh, yeah.
And we're looking at The War of Art by Steven Pressfield.
Great book.
Yeah, just skimming it, I have to admit, I felt a little called out.
Well, Pressfield, he doesn't really sugarcoat it. He calls resistance the enemy of creativity and anything that pushes us towards growth. But what I find really interesting is that he gives us a framework, a way to actually understand it,
Yeah.
recognize its tricks, and then finally overcome it.
So it's not just like a vague, ooh, I don't want to, it's a real thing with tactics.
Absolutely.
Okay, now I really want to hear more.
Yeah.
He calls it resistance. But how would you describe this force to someone who's never even heard of the concept?
I think a good way to think about it is it's that voice in your head. You know, the one that says, maybe tomorrow, when you should be starting that new project, or the one that tells you you're not good enough, talented enough, not ready enough for your dreams. That's resistance. And it's not limited to just creative pursuits. It pops up anywhere in life where we're trying to grow, evolve, step outside our comfort zone.
Okay, I'm already starting to see how this applies to,
Mm-hmm.
like, pretty much everyone. But it's not just procrastination, right?
Right.
Pressfield says it can disguise itself in all these really sneaky ways.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons it's so difficult to overcome. It's like a master of disguise, always changing, always shape-shifting to keep us stuck. Pressfield lists some common activities that trigger resistance. Things like starting a creative project, launching a business, or even just, committing to a relationship. Basically anything that requires us to level up, anything that pushes us towards our true potential.
Yeah, he even mentions, like, unhealthy behaviors.
Yeah.
Excessive preoccupation with things like sex or even self-medication.
He does. And it's important to say that he's not saying those things are inherently bad in and of themselves. It's more about the motivation. Are we engaging in these behaviors as a way to numb ourselves, to distract ourselves from the real work? Or are they genuinely fulfilling?
So it's not about judging. It's about becoming aware of the patterns and asking ourselves, is this serving me or is this resistance?
That's a really good way to put it. And Pressfield gives us a tool, a way to develop that awareness. He suggests we ask ourselves, if I were the last person on Earth, would I still do this? And if the answer is yes, well, then we're probably on the right track. But if it's no, then maybe it's time to reevaluate.
Okay, that's a powerful question. I'm definitely going to be thinking about that one. Now, from what I've read so far, Pressfield also talks about how resistance is like strongest right at the finish line. What's that about?
He uses this analogy of Odysseus, almost home after years of wandering, and then, boom, shipwrecked because his crew can't resist opening that bag of wine.
Oh, right.
It's like resistance knows when we're about to break through, so it throws everything it has at us to try to stop us.
So just when we think we've almost won, we need to be extra vigilant.
Absolutely. It's a battle that needs constant awareness and discipline. We can't afford to let our guard down.
Which leads to the big question. How do we fight back? How do we win this war against resistance? And this is where Turning Pro comes in, right?
Yes, and it's important to say that turning pro isn't about quitting your job and becoming a starving artist.
Right.
It's a change, a shift in mindset. It's about taking control of your creative journey.
Okay, so practically, how do we make that shift? What does Turning Pro actually look like?
Think about the qualities of a professional in any field. Discipline, commitment, consistency. Showing up day after day, no matter how you feel, those are the hallmarks. And Pressfield says we need to bring that same level of professionalism to our creative pursuits.
So like making a schedule, sticking to it, treating our creative work like with the same seriousness that we bring to our jobs.
Precisely. It's about making that conscious decision to treat our creative work as a priority, not just something we fit in when we have time or feel like it.
Now, Pressfield tells this great story about working on King Kong Lives, which, as we all know, was a total flop.
Oh, yeah.
But he learned something really valuable during that experience about professionalism.
He did. He realized that, yeah, external validation can be nice, but it's fleeting. It's unreliable. What matters is the work itself, the process of showing up and doing your best no matter what. That's a really powerful lesson for anyone on a creative path, because rejection and failure are just inevitable.
So it's not about becoming immune to criticism or failure, but about developing a kind of resilience and knowing that your worth as an artist doesn't depend on the opinions of others.
Exactly. It's about that inner confidence, that unshakable belief in yourself and your vision, even when the world doesn't seem to get it.
Okay, so we've talked about resistance, this idea of turning pro, the need for resilience and self-belief. But Pressfield also delves into some pretty mystical territory. He talks about these unseen forces that come to our aid when we commit to the work. I'm curious to hear your take on that.
He uses words like muses and angels, which might not resonate with everyone. But even if you're not into the mystical language, what he's talking about is tapping into the unconscious mind, or that deeper instinct that drives us.
So, like, there's this part of us, this deeper wisdom that wants us to create, wants us to evolve, become who we're meant to be. And when we get out of our own way, that part can do its thing.
I like that. That's a great way to put it. And Pressfield says that by simply taking action, by doing the work, we create an opening for those forces to work through us.
One image that really stayed with me was the aircraft carrier stuck on land, our potential, trapped by resistance. But once we take charge, we can steer that ship.
Powerful metaphor, right? It really speaks to the power of taking ownership of that creative journey,
Hmm.
recognizing we have the power to break free from these limitations.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground, but before we move on, I want to go back to this idea of resistance and how it operates. Pressfield gets into some really specific ways it tries to keep us stuck.
Yeah,
Procrastination is the obvious one, right?
absolutely.
We've all been there. A million reasons to put things off.
Yeah, and Pressfield, he emphasizes recognizing procrastination as self-sabotage. It's a way of avoiding the discomfort of change and growth. But he doesn't just tell us to stop procrastinating, right? He gives some concrete strategies for actually breaking free.
Like what?
Well, he talks about setting realistic goals, breaking down big tasks into smaller steps, and focusing on the process, not just the outcome.
He also talks about understanding your own resistance patterns, right?
Yeah.
Knowing what triggers you.
Exactly. And then you can develop strategies to counter those triggers. It could be setting up a workspace, eliminating distractions, or even just committing to the work, even when you don't feel like it.
So recognizing that procrastination is a habit, a pattern, and you can unlearn it.
That's right. It takes time and effort, but it's possible to create new habits that actually support your creative goals.
Now, going beyond just procrastination, Pressfield also talks about how resistance can show up as excessive preoccupation with certain things, like, well, sex, for example.
Right.
I have to admit, that one kind of threw me for a loop.
It can be a bit surprising, but if you think about it, sex offers immediate gratification.
Yeah.
It's a quick fix, a distraction from the real work. That's exactly what resistance wants. It wants to keep us distracted, keep us chasing after easy pleasures instead of doing the challenging things that will actually lead to growth and fulfillment.
Okay, so it's like resistance is constantly tempting us with the easiest path,
Yeah.
offering us shiny objects to keep us from digging deeper.
Exactly, and it's not just sex. It's any kind of escapism, shopping, internet gossip, anything that keeps us from our true purpose.
So it's about being aware of how we numb ourselves,
Mm.
how we avoid discomfort, and making the choice to actually face those challenges head on.
Yes, absolutely. It's about recognizing that fulfillment comes from engaging with life, embracing the good and the bad, the joys and sorrows that make up the human experience.
Pressfield even mentions choosing a mate, choosing a partner, as a potential manifestation of resistance. I found that really thought-provoking.
He suggests that if we're not aware of our own resistance, we might choose partners who are successfully overcoming theirs. It's like projecting our unlived life onto them, hoping their success will rub off.
So instead of taking responsibilities like, I can't do it, but maybe you can. Almost like living vicariously through them.
Exactly, and it can also go the other way around. We might support our partner who's pursuing their dreams while neglecting our own. It's okay for you to take risks, but not for me. Either way, it can keep both people stuck.
So being honest with ourselves about our motivations and relationships is important. Like, are we truly supportive of our partner's growth?
Yeah.
Or are we secretly resentful? Are we using their success as an excuse?
Right, those are great questions. Because real love should support the growth of both partners. It's not about holding each other back.
Okay, we've talked about how resistance shows up as procrastination, escapism, even in our relationships.
Yeah.
But what about, like, our overall well-being? Pressfield suggests that resistance can actually manifest as unhappiness.
Yeah, and it makes sense. If we're always resisting our true selves, our calling, it creates this internal conflict and stress.
And that stress can show up in so many ways.
Yeah.
Physically, emotionally, mentally.
Absolutely.
It's like carrying around this weight, this burden.
And what's tricky is that we live in a culture that's constantly trying to exploit that unhappiness by selling us things, drugs, distractions, anything to keep us from the source of our discontent.
Yeah, it's like we're told happiness is something we buy, something we consume. when the real source is doing the work our soul is calling us to do.
You got it.
It's like we need to develop like a resistance detector, a way to see when it's trying to trick us into settling for less.
Absolutely.
No, another point that Pressfield makes is that resistance, it plays on our insecurities,
Oh, yeah.
our fear of failing, our need for approval. It whispers these doubts telling us we're not good enough, not talented enough.
Right, and that's where those limiting beliefs come in, the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and what we're capable of.
Okay, so how do we break free from those beliefs? How do we reprogram our minds to support us?
Well, Pressfield suggests a few strategies. One is just to become aware of them, to
Mhm.
start paying attention to that negative self-talk.
Shining a light on the shadows, bringing them out in the open.
Exactly, and once we see them, we can start to challenge them, ask ourselves, is this really true? Is there any evidence for this?
And I imagine a lot of the time we'll realize they're based on fear, past experiences or what other people have said, not actual truth.
Absolutely. And Pressfield encourages us to replace those limiting beliefs with more empowering ones.
So it's not just about getting rid of the negative, but actively cultivating a positive dialogue.
Yes. It's about shifting from scarcity to abundance, from fear to love, from limitations to possibilities.
Okay, I love that. We've covered procrastination, escapism, those limiting beliefs, and how important self-awareness is. But now Pressfield introduces this fascinating concept of territory versus hierarchy. I'd love to dig into that.
He uses this framework to explain how we see ourselves in the world and how that impacts our ability to overcome resistance. You see, in the animal kingdom, individuals define themselves in one of two ways, either by their rank in a hierarchy, like a wolf pack, or by their connection to a territory like a home base or hunting ground.
So it's about where we find our sense of belonging and purpose.
Exactly. And Pressfield argues that for artists, a hierarchical orientation is deadly. It leads to competition, comparison, and this constant need for approval.
Yeah.
Keeps us focused on what others think instead of what truly matters to us.
It's like constantly climbing a ladder, always looking over your shoulder instead of enjoying the climb itself.
That's exactly what resistance wants, right? To
Right.
keep us trapped in this cycle of striving and comparing, always chasing after approval instead of finding fulfillment in the work.
Okay, so how does a territorial orientation help us overcome resistance?
Well, in Pressfield's view, a territory is a place where you feel safe, where you can be yourself, where you can create without judgment. It sustains you, without any external input.
Like your own personal creative sanctuary where you connect with yourself and do your best work.
Exactly. He gives some great examples of territories like Stevie Wonder. His territory is the piano. Arnold Schwarzenegger, his is the gym.
So not necessarily a physical space, it's
Yeah.
any activity that lets you tap into that flow state where time disappears.
Right, but here's the key. You can only claim a territory through work. It has to be earned.
You're tending to it, nurturing it.
And the beauty is that it shifts our focus from external validation to internal fulfillment. You're not doing the work to impress others. You're doing it because it feeds your soul.
It's like giving yourself permission to create for the pure joy of it without the fear of judgment.
Exactly. And that freedom, that sense of liberation is the most powerful antidote to resistance there is.
Okay, I'm really seeing how this idea of territory can change the game. But how do we actually find our own territory? How do we know if we found that place where passion and purpose really meet?
Pressfield has a couple of tests. One we already talked about. If I were the last person on Earth, would I still do this?
Right, right.
If the answer is a big yes, you're probably in your territory. He also talks about the anxiety test. Ask yourself, if I were feeling anxious, what would I do? Now, if you're looking for reassurance from others, looking for validation from friends or colleagues, you're probably operating from that hierarchical mindset, looking to others to define your worth.
But if you're operating from a territorial mindset,
You'd turn inward. Seek grounding in your territory. Maybe you go for a run, work on a painting, or lose yourself in a coding project. The activity itself provides comfort and stability regardless of any feedback.
finding your center like an anchor in a storm.
Yes, and here's where things get really interesting. Pressfield says once you find your territory, you have to claim it. You have to make it yours. You have to defend it.
Okay, I like where this is going. Tell me more about claiming your territory and defending it from, resistance. How do you do that?
It starts with commitment, a declaration. You're telling yourself, this is where I belong, this is where I do my best work.
Planting a flag.
Exactly. And it takes fierceness, a willingness to fight for your right to create, to express yourself, to live a life that's true to your calling.
So we plant our flag, we've claimed it. What then? How do we defend it?
Pressfield has lots of strategies, but they all come back to one principle. You have to do the work. Day after day, week after week, year after year, you have to become relentless.
Like building a fortress around your territory, brick by brick.
Exactly, and the more you build, the stronger it becomes, the less
Yeah.
power resistance has, and the more freedom you have.
So it's a process, a journey of self-discovery and creative expression. It's not about achieving some goal, it's about embracing the journey.
And that's where the magic happens. In the process of creating, of overcoming those challenges, of pushing yourself, that's where you find your potential. It's a beautiful thing, isn't it? The more we surrender to the process, the more control we actually have.
It's like letting go of the need to micromanage everything, to force things to happen, on our timeline. We have to trust that the creative process, it has its own intelligence, its own rhythm.
Yeah, and when we tap into that rhythm, we enter that flow state, that effortless creation where time disappears.
Pressfield, he talks about flow a lot in the book, right?
Oh, he does. He describes it as a state of heightened awareness where our ego kind of steps back and we can access this level of creativity, of insight that's beyond our normal capability.
Like tapping into this pure creative energy, a stream that just flows through you.
And he's adamant that you can't force the flow state.
Right.
It's something you cultivate through practice, through discipline, and through surrender.
So it's not about making it happen. It's about creating the conditions for it to just arise naturally.
Exactly. And he gives some really practical advice for doing that. One, just show up and do the work, even when you don't feel like it. Inspiration often follows action.
Get to prime the pump.
That's it. And then think about eliminating distractions, creating a space where you can truly focus.
So no phone, no email, just you and the work.
Precisely. And having a clear goal in mind is important too. Knowing what you're trying to achieve, even if you don't know exactly how you're going to get there.
It's like having a destination, but being open to different routes.
And letting go of perfectionism is huge. Embracing the messiness of it all.
Yeah, because if you're constantly striving for perfect, you'll never get there, right? You'll be too busy second-guessing yourself.
Absolutely. Flow requires a certain level of trust. Letting go of control and letting the creative process just unfold naturally.
And Pressfield also mentions how important it is to learn from those who came before us.
Oh, yeah, he's big on that. He encourages us to study the masters, to learn from their techniques, to draw inspiration from their work. He sees the creative process as this ongoing conversation, and by immersing ourselves in that conversation, we tap into this well of wisdom.
It's like standing on the shoulders of giants.
Exactly, and he believes that humility, that recognition that we're part of something larger, it's essential for growth.
Now, Pressfield also goes pretty deep when he talks about this higher realm as a source of inspiration. Earlier, you mentioned that even if someone's not particularly spiritual, there's still something relatable in this idea. Can we dig into that a bit more?
Sure. He uses terms like muses and angels, which can definitely sound a little out there. But what he's pointing to is that there are forces at play beyond our conscious control. Like intuition or instinct, or even just that feeling of being in the zone.
So it's not about believing in like supernatural beings. It's about acknowledging that there's a dimension to creativity that's beyond our logical minds.
You got it.
Yeah.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Pressfield talks about how he begins each writing session by invoking the muse with a prayer from the Odyssey.
I love that image. It's like he's acknowledging this power that's bigger than him, creating a space for inspiration to come through.
And there's something really practical in that, even if you don't believe in muses. It's about creating a ritual, a sacred space for your creative work.
So even if it's not a prayer, it could be like lighting a candle or putting on music or taking a few deep breaths, just something to signal that you're shifting into a different mode.
That's it. It's about creating that container for the creative process.
Okay, Pressfield also tells a story about meditating, where an eagle lands on his shoulders and takes him on a flight.
Oh, yeah, the eagle meditation. It's powerful imagery, right? Connecting with your higher self.
And he receives this message, about the power of the unseen. I have to admit, that one really struck a chord with me. It's like we often dismiss our dreams or intuitions, our gut feelings, when in reality, those are powerful sources of guidance.
And he argues that those whispers from the unconscious, they're often trying to guide us towards our purpose, towards the work that our soul is calling us to do.
Like an internal compass A GPS guiding us towards our highest good.
And he really encourages us to cultivate practices that help us access this wisdom, whether it's meditation or journaling or just spending time in nature.
Developing that sensitivity to the whispers of the universe.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes Pressfield's work so compelling. He's not just giving us practical advice, he's inviting us to explore the spiritual side of creativity, to connect with something greater than ourselves.
Which leads to a question I've been thinking about. What if our creative block, our resistance, is actually a sign that we're on the wrong path? What if it's not something to overcome, but something to listen to?
That's such a good question. And I think Pressfield would agree that sometimes resistance is a sign we're out of alignment, that we're chasing a goal that's not truly ours, or using our energy in a way that's not serving us.
So how do we know the difference?
Hmm.
How do we tell if it's resistance trying to keep us stuck or resistance trying to point us in a new direction?
That's where discernment comes in. Tuning into your intuition, your heart, asking yourself those honest questions. Why am I doing this? What am I hoping for? Does this feel right?
And if the answer is no, if there's this dread that just won't go away, maybe it's time to reconsider, maybe try a different path.
Exactly. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from something that's no longer serving you, even if it means starting over, even if it's scary.
It's like trusting that the universe has a plan, even when we can't see it yet.
And that's where faith comes in, right? Faith in yourself and the process, in something larger than yourself.
So it's not just about beating resistance, it's about understanding what it's telling us, letting it guide us towards a more authentic expression of ourselves.
Beautifully said. That's the heart of what it means to be an artist, embracing the journey, the ups and downs, and letting it all transform you.
Okay, so we've talked about claiming territory, about finding that flow, listening to intuition. But what about the practical side of turning pro? What are some concrete things we can do to actually cultivate that mindset and overcome resistance?
Pressfield gives a ton of practical advice. Discipline, showing up every day, doing the work even when you don't feel like it.
Like making it a job, even if it's not paying the bills yet.
Exactly. He talks about creating a schedule, a workspace, getting rid of distractions, break down those big tasks into smaller steps, and celebrate those wins.
So not waiting for inspiration, but creating a routine that supports your creative goals.
Precisely. Consistency is key. Showing up even when you're tired or uninspired or doubting yourself.
And he also talks about the importance of mastering your craft, right?
Yeah,
Becoming really skilled at what you do.
he does. And he says that mastery, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes dedication, practice, and a willingness to learn, even when it's tough.
He even mentions seeking feedback, being vulnerable enough to share your work.
Yeah, and being able to tell the difference between constructive criticism and just negativity. Filtering out the noise and focusing on the feedback that can help you grow.
Developing a discerning ear.
Exactly. And having a healthy relationship with failure is crucial too.
Yeah, he's really clear that failure is part of the process. You can't create anything worthwhile without risking rejection.
And he wants us to see failure not as a personal failing, but as a chance to learn, to grow. Every successful artist, every entrepreneur, they've all faced countless setbacks.
It's not about avoiding failure, it's about seeing it as part of the journey.
Precisely. It's about resilience, learning from mistakes, using those setbacks to push you forward.
And finding that self-validation, not needing external approval to define your worth.
Right. A professional artist seeks feedback, but ultimately trusts their own gut.
It's like that balance, being open to feedback, but staying true to your vision.
Exactly. And focusing on the joy of creating, not just the outcome.
So it's about the journey, not the destination.
Yeah.
Finding that fulfillment in the act of creation itself.
Yes, yes. And I think that's such an important point, especially today with all the emphasis on external validation, likes, followers, awards. It's so easy to forget the joy of simply doing the work.
Right, like we've lost sight of the intrinsic value.
And Pressfield argues that when we focus on those external rewards, we actually hurt our creative process. We're more worried about pleasing others than expressing our true selves.
We put ourselves in a box, trying to fit some standard.
That's it. And he wants us to break free from that box, to create from a place of freedom and authenticity, even if it means going against the grain, even if it means facing rejection.
So trusting our own compass, following our own path, even if it's unconventional.
Exactly. He reminds us that the most powerful work often comes from those who are willing to break the rules, to challenge the norms.
Now, Pressfield also brings up the idea of the shadow artist, that part of ourselves that's afraid to really shine, afraid to share our gifts.
Yeah, he says everyone has that, a part that's afraid to step into their potential. And that fear can show up in so many ways: procrastination, perfectionism, self sabotage, or even just denying that you have any gifts at all.
So, like, there's this part that wants to create, but another part that's terrified of what might happen if we actually do.
Exactly. And he thinks that fear is often rooted in our childhood. The messages we get from our parents, teachers, about what's acceptable, what's worthy of praise.
Like, those messages become part of our subconscious programming, influencing our beliefs about ourselves.
Exactly. And he says the key to overcoming that fear is to become aware of those beliefs and to challenge them.
So, recognizing that those beliefs are based on fear, on other people's opinions, not on any real truth about who we are.
And replacing those limiting beliefs with empowering ones. Affirm your worthiness, your talent, your right to create, regardless of what anyone else says.
It's like rewiring our minds, creating a new narrative.
And a big part of that is self-compassion. The shadow artist is often fueled by shame, by that belief that you're not good enough.
So, it's about learning to love ourselves unconditionally, flaws and all.
Absolutely. Self-acceptance is essential for creativity. It allows you to create from a place of freedom without fear of judgment.
Giving ourselves permission to be imperfect, to let our light shine, even if it's a little messy.
That's it. That's the essence of being an artist. It's not about perfection, it's about the journey. Embracing the challenges and the triumphs and letting it all transform you.
He reminds us that the journey isn't always easy. There will be times when you feel discouraged, frustrated, like giving up.
Oh, yeah. He encourages us to keep going, to remember why you started,
Right.
to reconnect with your passion, your purpose. He uses this great metaphor, the critter that keeps coming.
Oh, yeah?
It's
Yeah.
like we have to have that same never give up spirit, like John Wayne's character in The Searchers, who just keeps going year after year looking for his niece.
It's about grit, right? That unwavering commitment.
Exactly. And he says that's what allows us to overcome resistance and reach our potential.
And Pressfield doesn't pretend that this is a one-time thing. Resistance never really goes away, does it?
He compares it to a telemarketer.
Oh, I like that.
You shouldn't even answer the phone. Don't engage. Don't give it your energy.
Because if you do, you're just feeding it, giving it power.
That's right. And he also says that resistance, it loves to disguise itself as rationalization. It tells us you're not talented enough, it's not the right time, you need to wait for the perfect conditions.
It's sneaky.
Yeah, and Pressfield wants us to see through those rationalizations, recognize them for what they are, and refuse to let them derail us.
We need that no excuses policy when it comes to our creative work.
He even talks about how resistance can recruit allies, our friends, our family trying to discourage us.
That is so true. Sometimes the people who love us the most, they're the most resistant to us changing and growing.
Right, and Pressfield encourages us to be compassionate but firm. Don't let other people's fears dictate your choices.
So set boundaries, be clear about your needs, and surround yourself with people who believe in you.
Yeah. And it's important to recognize that resistance can also show up as criticism.
Right, both from others and ourselves.
It's like resistance is this inner critic, always finding fault, trying to tear us down.
Okay.
And he wants us to develop a discerning ear, to be able to tell the difference between constructive criticism and just negativity.
Filtering out the noise, focusing on what's helpful.
He also says, don't compare yourself to others. Don't get caught up in that trap of competition and envy. Everyone has their own unique path, their own timeline.
So focus on your journey, your own victories.
Exactly. See the success of others as inspiration, as proof that anything is possible if you put in the work.
He's also clear that success isn't a destination, it's a journey.
Right. It's not about fame or fortune. It's about living in alignment with your purpose day after day.
Which is a powerful message in a culture that's so focused on, external validation.
Absolutely. Pressfield wants us to redefine success. Focus on the joy, the fulfillment that comes from simply creating.
So as we're wrapping up this part of the deep dive, what's one thing you really hope listeners take away?
That creativity, it's not a luxury. It's essential. And it's not just for a select few, it's for everyone. When we embrace our creative impulses, we're not just making our own lives better, we're making the world a more beautiful, more meaningful place.
I love that. And I think that's a perfect transition to the final part of our deep dive. We're going to explore this idea of the spiritual side of creativity, the higher realm, and how our creative work can be about service, not just self-expression. So we've spent a good amount of time talking about the practical side of resistance, what it is, how to recognize it, and those concrete steps to turn pro and overcome it.
Yeah.
But I keep coming back to this idea that Pressfield brings up, again and again.
Yeah.
That creativity isn't just a personal thing.
Yeah.
It's connected to something much bigger.
It's true. He really dives into this whole concept of a higher realm, this source of inspiration that goes beyond our own little ego and connects us to something greater.
Yeah, he uses terms like muses and angels, and I'll admit that part sometimes throws me off a bit. Like, it gets a little too mystical for me, but then there's still this pull, like maybe there's some truth there, even if I don't quite grasp it.
What if we think about it a little differently? Instead of muses, what if it's tapping into this collective unconscious, a wellspring of creativity that we all share? Or, remember you mentioned those times when the words just flow through you?
Yeah.
Like you're a channel for something beyond your conscious mind?
That's more what it feels like, yeah.
Yeah.
When you're so into a project that time disappears, the ideas they just come.
That's exactly what he's talking about.
Uh-huh.
And he believes that when we align ourselves with this higher force, this source of creative energy, we can achieve incredible things we couldn't do on our own.
So how do we do that? Is it meditation? Prayer? I'm picturing people in robes chanting.
It could be, but it doesn't have to be. Think about Pressfield, how he starts every writing session with that prayer from Homer's Odyssey.
Right.
That's his way of connecting.
It's a ritual, a way to set the intention, to be open.
Exactly. And it could be anything that works for you. Walking in nature, listening to music, even just sitting in silence for a few minutes before you start working.
The important thing is to find what resonates with you personally, what helps quiet the mind and connect with that deeper source.
Now, he also makes the point that this connection isn't just about receiving inspiration. It's also about using our creativity to serve a purpose, something beyond ourselves.
He says creative work is a gift to the world, a way to share our perspective and make a difference.
Yeah, it's like we're not creating just for us, but for something much bigger. And that sense of purpose, that feeling of contributing something meaningful, that can be incredibly powerful.
So it's not just about overcoming our own personal resistance. It's almost like we become a channel for something greater.
I like that. That's beautifully put, and that's what makes Pressfield's message so powerful. It's not just advice for getting over writer's block, it's an invitation to go on this spiritual journey.
Okay, to bring this down to earth for a second, how would someone actually apply this idea of service to their work?
Okay, let's say you're a musician. You could write songs just for yourself, or to try and become famous, which is fine.
Yeah.
But there's another level.
Like writing songs that inspire others, help them heal, or feel less alone.
Exactly. Or a painter who focuses on creating art that brings joy and sparks conversation, rather than just trying to sell for a lot of money.
So it's about asking, how can my work be of service? How can it contribute to something beyond myself?
And it doesn't have to be huge, you know? It could be sharing your work with friends, teaching a skill to someone, just using your talent to brighten someone's day.
So the size of the impact matters less than the intention.
Right. It's about aligning your creative work with a sense of purpose.
When we do that, when our focus shifts from just ourselves to serving others, something changes.
It does. The
Yeah.
work takes on this new dimension, this depth and richness.
Which I think is what Pressfield is trying to get at in The War of Art. It's not just about conquering our own resistance, it's about being part of something larger than ourselves.
He's reminding us that we're all connected, that our creativity has an impact, and when we embrace that, we contribute to something much bigger, something that can change the world.
That's a powerful message, especially now. So to our listener, we'll leave you with this. What if the world is waiting for your unique contribution? What if your creative work is that missing piece?
Don't let fear win. Don't let resistance hold you back. The world needs your art, your music, your writing, your ideas. It needs your expression of the creative force that flows through all of us.
So go out there, turn pro, and create.